Hello, welcome back everyone. So as per usual, we will start with the status things. Arun, I'm gonna put you on the spot a bit. How are you going on with the OSFCI setup?
Yeah, things are looking good. As per plan, we updated to the specific version of Ubuntu that you require for the tool to be built. So I'm now going to try and get a build working on there and make sure that everything's working. And from there, we'll go.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
And thanks, Karen, for the notes. I think I messed up the doc a bit there. Next up, Igor. I would be interested if you have an update on the results viewer, and if you have anything else, feel free to share.
Yeah, hi everyone. I don't have any updates. I think Dan responded with an email. He said he can join one of meetings and demonstrate the viewer. I think that was his response. So apparently soon, in a few weeks, I hope. Yeah, that's all I have.
Okay, that would be nice actually. I think I missed that email. I'll add a person from our side because they're interested in the viewer, and I told them like to wait. Maybe we coordinate this better. Go ahead, Kieran.
The OCP support for this was actually apparently completed. The last I knew was they were updating to a GitHub repo. I don't know if that is done yet, but it's almost there. I remember Ronnie was, the person who was working on this. OCP diag viewer, that's the GitHub repo. I don't know if it's been created and if it's been uploaded, but that is the plan here.
Okay, I'll try to find that email. Maybe there's something in the email. If I look at OCP diag core, the repo that we have, which should be the right place for this tool, I don't see anything new though.
Yeah, I can see that as well, but probably it's still not done. But the implementation is done, so it's about pretty much uploading it.
Okay, that's very good news. Thanks, Karen. Go ahead, Igor.
So, Adrian, you want to know this specific date for the demo so that you can invite somebody else to see it, or did I understand it wrong?
I did not actually ask that, but if we can get that, that would be even better.
Okay. So that, people who are interested can join the meeting and see the tool. Okay.
Yeah. So if you're saying there's an email, I'll look for that email and I'll ask Dan directly if he wants to join one of the calls to present that. I'm assuming it's going to be Dan, but if there's someone else, then that's also fine.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Vincent, any updates? Anything you want to share? Any topics for discussion? By the way, I didn't say this in the beginning, but if you have topics, feel free to add them to the agenda.
So let me ask a quick question about the diag viewer. As I had a couple of chats about this, as it's an important topic from a UI representation for the users of our test executives. One of the points that came up, and that's why I'll be very interested to see the current demo, but it will be interesting to discuss the contribution model to it because it's representation of output, and that's going to matter. And to anchor this discussion, currently in our Fava framework, we have this header at the on every output of test that basically breaks down kind of the metadata relevant to a test. So, this is your boilerplate information about what the target device under test is, some part numbers, some serial numbers, some dates, you know, kind of your typical metadata. And there was a concern moving into a generic viewer that you know, we would want a way to represent that because our users have become accustomed to reading through that header. It's useful to them. So I do think I'm not really asking a question here to the group, but I will be looking forward to that demo to see how to augment that to keep and retain an option for different environments and the different companies that are contributing to retain some of the information that is relevant to them. So before moving on from the viewer, I did wanted to share that because it's not necessarily a, you know, a trivial bit to underestimate or pass on. So yeah, Adrian.
So I have an opinion on that. Before we continue with the rest of your updates. The way I see this and that we have discussed before, so I want to do a refresher as well. We have discussed this idea of translators between the spec and various other outputs, basically. And the spec is designed in such a way so that it is able to be a superset of any other output that you may want to present out of a diag, right? So if I remember correctly, for your Fava usage, and I don't know how much detail I can go into, but basically you have this already established output that people are used to. And while it will be ideal to move to the OCP one as a standard, as a reference, and you know, retrain the people, as it were, we're in the position of needing to translate, at least for a while, from the OCP TV output to that existing one, right? This should be technically possible. Now, the discussion with this result viewer, what I got from Dan, and I haven't seen the tool, but I think I got a pretty good understanding of it, is that this result viewer is basically a UI, you could think of it, for the actual result. Like instead of going through the JSON and reading like line by line and whatever, it's this thing that parses your JSON and collects like files, artifacts, whatever, but basically presents the output in a nicer way. It's not necessarily translated into something different. So the point I'm getting to is, I think translators are a kind of one-off thing that depends on the consumer. So if you wanna, like, based on your question, this is what I'm starting from. You were saying to, you know, some model to collaborate into this result viewer so that it also addresses your use cases. And while that's generally a good thing, and we should collab for this particular output translation, I don't think it is exactly the thing that you want there. Like we can embed it as like a longer term view, but the translator that you want is from OCP TV to something that you already have. And putting that something you already have in this result viewer, I don't think it is really necessary. I hope that was a long thing, but I hope that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. I also, there is the in between the spectrum you painted. There is an in between, right, where the discussion that I've had with the team is around, for example, the header that we output in Fava today has this metadata that users have come to expect out of every test, and they can quickly fetch information, you know, what product it is, what date, what test plan was used, stuff like that. They just have gotten used to know what to look for. And losing that and having to fetch that out of an output, whether it's a pretty printed or a different renderer, could be a problem. So there's a bit of an in-between. We may want to retain the header and then fall into the either translated output or literally have what you're talking about, which is the UI visualization that Dan will demo. But also there's an underlying question that it could be that the .info and the hardware info that is embedded in the OCP DAG may potentially not have everything, which would be a miss on our part, to be honest. But it could be that in this case, that would be something to pick up. So those are some of the conversations that are going on this one, and I think it will be a good discussion at the demo day.
All right. So clearly, we have to look in more detail on what the requirements are, right?
So what is the header metadata today? Where is this captured?
Before you answer that, let me continue with what I was saying. I would say that if this header is considered generally useful for the whole group, basically what Kiran is asking right now, then we could put it in the result viewer. But we need to look at what that is, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and Karen, just to your question, I mean, this is a boilerplate header part of every Fava test output today. So this is just a convenience we've put in our test executive, and it's basically more test executive focused than diagnostics, so to speak. I mean, it's kind of part of the test executive.
So does it reflect in the OCP TV output? No, the diag output.
So the way Daniel implemented the porting of Fava tests outputting OCP diag is that these lines are actually emitted as log lines. So they are currently, so because every test that we run within Meta now are outputting de facto OCP diag compliant output. But when we look at that output, basically the first 30 lines, the first 20 lines are these log lines that are making up this header, which is a little questionable, right? I mean, it looks good, it looks correct, but it's actually a special type of log. It's really the header of the test. But if you look at the output, I mean, it is compliant to OCP diag JSON spec, but by virtue of log lines, not per se being distinct information.
Okay.
Adrian.
So yeah, so that's exactly why I'm saying we should look at this. To me, I don't want to make this sound simplistic, but to me, it sounds like when you make an utils module or miscellaneous or whatever. So it sounds to me like these log lines have semantics and meaning, and instead of putting them in the right place, whether we have a right place is arguable, we can discuss that. You need to output them as raw log strings and then infer meaning from them. So it sounds like we need to address more there than just at face value.
Exactly, Adrian. That's the right turn of a right way to put the question. That's it.
All right. I think we're done with this topic. If you have other things.
Yeah. So my other question is something that unfortunately Daniel cannot attend this meeting. So I'm going to do my best to represent some of the stuff that we talk about. So one of the things that we've been pending on doing for a while, and that should be happening soon, is to have the full tie-in of running an OCP diag straight out of GitHub in Fava, which is not something we've done to date, and that is the next step, and that involves the linking basically. Without getting into the details of Fava, but basically there is what we call a test suite that defines the sequence of test cases that are going to be run. And the test executive dispatches the run command to the device, that there's an agent on the device that runs, that essentially launches the process that executes the OCP diag utility. And so we haven't actually taken a GitHub download from, say, OCP diag sat, memtester, LMT, CTEM. We haven't done that. And so this is the next step. And Daniel's going to be doing that. And I think it will be, it will be very exciting to see that happen. I think we'll have some good conversations coming of this. But I did have a question to our group here around who is currently made any of these OCP diag GitHub, the code on GitHub, part of your production system or your development system? Do we currently have them plugged into either a CI, or is it part of your production? I'd be interested to know, because I can say for us, it is the plan. We are looking to make these OCP diags part of our production test suites. And I would love to hear more if anybody has done it and run into gotchas.
I have a reply to your question, but I will wait to see if someone else shows up.
I have this one. So for us, for completely deploying into prod, we have the dev path requirement that sort of comes in the way. We do have some limited OCP diag for some platforms which do not follow the routine repair process, but we have a limited exposure there for OCP diags in general. Yeah. The dev path is sort of a big thing for us because all of our downstream processes are driven by that.
The dev path, just quick follow-up. The dev path is you identify that from the HAL library, right?
The hardware.
HWI, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're kind of back to that discussion.
Yeah.
Though we use the results library in few diags, I think directly, like there is no dev path support, but the results are used. Though the number of diags compared to the total number of diags we have is small.
Can you explain a bit more, Igor, what you mean by the results?
The OCP results library written in Python, there are a few diags that use it in our system.
So that's the Python API.
Python API, yes. Primarily manufacturing, I think, because dev path is not a requirement there, right? So it's just for reporting results, not for providing dev paths for hardware. As far as I know, I may be wrong, so Kiran may confirm or deny it.
Yeah, no, that's right. So I think for manufacturing, we have a little more leeway because they're not also primarily looking at their paths. But I think the question by Vincent was prod. So for prod, we have this very limited thing for one particular product, which has a different kind of repair process, and we're able to sort of use.
Yeah, the thing is, maybe Vincent means something different by saying production, because we have this internal term prod, which refers to something, right? And people may think of different things when they hear production or prod.
Let me clarify. You're actually both right. I was ambiguous a bit intentionally, but I see it's misleading. Both obviously data center production and manufacturing production or have the term production. We happen to also use prod to imply in data center production. But usually we also do that reduction prod, right? When I say production, I do mean in general anything that is hardware production. So yeah, thanks for clarifying, Igor. I know Marcos is not on the call, but I would be interested to know essentially any use cases that have taken an OCP diag from GitHub and made it part of the workflow. If that is more prevalent in manufacturing, that would certainly be interesting to know, and what were some of the gotchas there.
Yeah, we should talk to Marcus. Definitely, he knows more about this.
Okay.
All right, so I would say we need to talk a bit about technicalities, Vincent. We can do this internally. To your question, and it isn't exactly what you asked, but I've been working with Aaron recently on running diags on the OSFCI setup. And there are some things to take into account. The Python diags should work as they are, and in our case, we need to decide whether we actually integrate those internally or we use them as a PyPy package. The diags that are more sensitive for the environment are those that are compiled. So the thing that Arun was trying to run was the SAT diag, which is behind Bazel. And the fact that it's compiled right now, like the setup that I made on GitHub, it is compiling it. It gives you a binary that you can download from GitHub, but it is compiled against system libraries on the Ubuntu 2204 that the GitHub CI has. So if you don't run Ubuntu 2204, then it's likely that it won't run. So for all of these, and this is kind of a moot point anyway, because internally we would need to compile everything from source anyway. So just as a heads up in terms of these technicalities, some of them may require this compilation process before you can actually run them in Fava.
Yeah, I mean, these are, I think we're talking about the adoption and the leverage we're getting out of these diags in practice, which is going to directly influence the contributions we make to the code base on GitHub, which I think so far is probably not high because these diags are not currently part of an actual pipeline of usage, right? So that's something that I am looking to change, because we have these really cool diags out there, and I want to make them part of the workflow. So yeah, we'll have an update on this as soon as Daniel gets around to do these integrations and we start actually running those. We're going to do some development work before putting them into full-on manufacturing production, and then influencing doing that in the DC prod, obviously. Yes, Igor?
So, Vincent, you're basically saying that we need a real user to continue, right? So that we know what is required for further development. Did I understand it right, or?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is really good stuff, right? The code that's on GitHub is not vaporware, but it's. I was gauging how much of it was actually currently actively used and leveraged. Yes. So in essence, are the bits actually running in production, whether it's manufacturing labs or factories?
Also, in Meta's case, Vincent, there are a couple of diags that are already being used, right, or at least experimented with. It's not the compiled one; it's Python-based, but there is progress on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Let's go to Yang. Yang, do you have any updates you want to share for this week?
Yeah, thanks for the discussion. I don't have like much updates for this forum. We added supports for more distros like Red Hat 9, Red Hat Enterprise 9, and we added YAML support for the configuration, so you can define the steps and how they are run with YAML instead of just JSON. And also more improvements to workloads like Postgres and Redis. That's it. And Adrian, I have a question. So did I missed this meeting for the last 2 weeks. Was there any item for virtual client or from Google?
So I do have one which is of interest to you. If you remember, Giovanni from Meta was interested in making this new spec of aggregating diagnostics. And it is very similar. Like, I don't know how much you discussed with him. I don't have the latest right now. But it is very similar to what virtual client does. If I recall correctly, I did ask you, Yang, maybe a couple of weeks ago, if you're okay with extracting this kind of, spec or semantic from virtual client and presenting it as a entity of its own, and then you would be able to say, okay, virtual client is actually compliant with this entity that may actually be implemented in other ways, right?
Okay, so are you asking me to work with Giovanni to see if like he can give me a spec and though I make virtual client compliant to the spec?
Somewhat like that, but
Okay.
it's not like you would need to make virtual client compliant. You would be compliant by default because the spec would be extracted from virtual client as it is right now. So
Okay.
basically, the way you define your tests with your workloads and monitors and all of that, that's what I'm talking about to be an entity by itself. It may get, add-ons or refinements as time passes, but at least initially, there is no work involved in virtual
Okay,
client.
understood. Yes, I'd like to follow up on that. Would you like to start an email between me and Giovanni and we can start working on this?
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, thanks. I don't
I
have
know.
his email. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do that, no worries. So I know Giovanni is currently working on a Rust API for the OCP output production. I think after he finishes with that, he will be interested in working on this aggregation spec because, I don't want to talk for him. He's not in the call right now. But what I got from him was that there is some internal project that would need such an aggregation thing. So if we can, collaborate on it and make it available for more people, then that's a big benefit.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Okay. So I think we're done with all of the people on the call. Karen, I don't know if I see you, Vincent. Let me ask Karen first if we have any updates, maybe from Venkat.
Not that's nothing major. It's still ongoing, I suppose. Rather than there being anything major, that can't wait until he comes back on the call.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Go ahead, Vincent.
Yeah, I actually was going to ask about the Rust integration. When back looking in our meeting notes, Igor on February 14th had given us a cool update. Igor, I think back then you didn't have an easy way to reshare that internal document that circulated within your company. Are you and Giovanni partnering closely on this? Sorry if this is a bit of a noob question there, but how has the Rust integration been evolving since?
Right, from my side, it's not been evolving because my management does not support this idea right now, so it's hard to, proceed. But the document, I shared it with folks. If it's relevant still, I can still publish it in GitHub discussions, for example. Just transfer pictures and text. If not, then we just wait for Giovanni and see what, you know, what he presents. So everything works.
So I think I have a better answer to your Vincent question, or at least more current. So Giovanni's plan is to finish this code base internally first. And I am currently doing reviews with him, and I'm helping on the code base. You know, it's also a kind of learning process for us, which is understandable. After this finishes and we have like a good code base, the plan was to open source that, and then we can get like external contributions or review comments, whatever. But overall, the Rust API is pretty in line with the Python one.
Okay, so well, obviously it's OCP diag compliant, but you're saying from a way it's being architected and conceived, it will resemble the OCP diag Python.
To the extent possible, constrained by the language, yes. So I am making some of these architectural decisions myself. So it is, you know, some things are possible in Python, but they're not that easy to do in Rust.
Okay, all right, that sounds fine. Thanks for the shedding some light, Igor and Adrian. Appreciate it. Now, maybe the obvious sort of managerial hat question: what's the time frame on what do we expect here? Is this by July, by the end of the year?
So no, end of the year, no. In a bit more detail, I guess, there are about 15 commits right now. I have approved 12 of them. So I am kind of expecting that it would be done within a couple of months at most.
So
I don't think it's gonna take that long, but I want to be conservative.
So this becomes a good candidate for an update to the summit in October. That would be a pretty good one to announce if it's ready by June, and then if we're able to have a couple diags contributed with Rust native binding, that would be a good announcement to share as well with the community.
We probably can start talking about that in the following weeks or months. We have like a couple of updates. We have like some new diags, this work with OSFCI. We'll probably get it working by then. And the Rust API would also be a thing on the list, yeah.
Great.
Okay. Have like 20 more minutes. Aaron says he needs to drop in 5 minutes. Anything else we want to discuss for today? There are things that are still pending from prior weeks, but we also don't have a lot of people on the call. So I don't want to necessarily start one of the bigger topics that took multiple weeks to discuss.
So maybe a logistic question, and really just putting it out there. We've thinned out in attendance in the last few weeks. I understand, I'm sure there's a lot of activities going on. Should we look at whether we do a bi-weekly instead or change our cadence? Would it be beneficial? Would it help? What's the pulse? What's the feeling here?
I have considered that. I'll jump in because I already have a prepared answer for you.
Go for it.
I have considered that, but I need to confirm with the OCP org itself if we have any constraints in that remark. Because as far as I know, the meetings were set, like the cadence was set by the org. If not, then maybe it is a better idea to talk every 2 weeks, because we would have like more updates at least. If anyone else has any opinions, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, do you want me to follow up, Adrian, with I think our contact is still Michael Schill, right?
Yes.
On whether, because I'm looking at our wiki here and I see the past call recording that was posted on the wiki was from last November, so it's been a little while that they've fallen off the posting of the recording. So maybe I'll follow up on that and ask if there's a constraint, because I know the DCMHS, I believe, meets monthly. Okay, let me take that up, but and obviously we won't make the change without without sort of discussing it a little bit more. So maybe next week we can revisit it.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks for that.
Okay.
Okay. In that case, if there's nothing else to talk about today, I think we can close 15 minutes early. So thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you all next week.
See ya.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
Bye.
thanks everyone.
Bye.
Thank